we are expanding our focus. And so this morning, we're going to hear from Mr. Greenlief, Pastor Mike, Reverend Greenlief, I don't know, whatever you want to call him, or just Mikey, I'm not entirely sure. Come on, Mike, come on up. Mike, come on up and be at home here. Give him a hand. This is your new... One of the first discussions Mike and I had is, what do we call each other? And I do not call him Pastor Mike. I asked him, don't call me Pastor Weldon. All right. So just to give some context, because you may or may not be familiar, Mike and his family have been in Seaford. He moved here, started working here almost a month ago, now almost exactly a month, and which means he's now my partner in ministry here, which I love having. And we're going to get a chance in a second to hear his heart and to hear what God has put on in his mind and some of the early parts of what he's visioning for the future. But about a year or so ago, I told you as an entire church family that the leaders, the elders and the leaders and the governing board had said that we felt that God desired for our church, for Atlanta Road Alliance Church, to be more active in our corporate outreach. And by that I mean to reach people that don't know Jesus in our community. And so we wanted to plant an expression of our church. We're calling it a missional outpost, but it's simply a physical location where we can meet physical needs that are currently not being met, or groups of people that are not being impacted with not only meeting their needs, but also with the grace and the love of God through the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so that we do that because we realize there are people we cannot reach here, right? In our culture, there are changes. 2/3 of people will never walk through the doors of a church no matter what. They just won't. It's kind of off limits for them. There are younger generations that don't feel the need for this, and so we can't expect them to come here. We need to go where they are. And so that's why we're doing it this way. And so we wanted to hire someone to lead and spearhead that because it takes some intentional focus and some intentional direction. And if you recall, a year ago I told you when you hire someone for church, when you hire an associate, you can do it for 3 reasons, right? One is I could hire someone just to do stuff I don't want to do, okay? That sounds very nice to me, but it's probably not the most effective thing in the world. The second thing you can do is you can hire someone for a position, right? You hire a youth pastor, a worship leader, someone that you want to take ownership, and that's great. But what we wanted to do was the third way, which was to hire for what God is going to do. Hiring into vision for the future. So I want you to keep that in mind, because we honestly didn't know who that was going to be, and I don't know if you know how hard it is to hire people today. It's no different in church world. In fact, in some ways it's more difficult because there's fewer and fewer people available. And so when we had this vision, we said, we have no idea who God would call into this vision that we have. And through a whole set of providential circumstances and conversations, we have before you Mike Greenlief. So, welcome. So, that's the little preamble. The rest is going to be more you sharing your heart with people. And so, Mike and I talked ahead of time. So, before we even go into the details, tell people a little bit about yourself. Because a bunch of you know Mike, but a bunch of you don't. So, why don't you tell people a little about yourself?
Yeah, I come from I would say more of a somewhat urban setting. Grew up in an urban setting, a small town, but it's still urban in nature. I grew up in a lot of ways a broken home in terms of addictions and going in and out of struggles with foster care and belonging and being loved and cared for, all those sorts of things that many of our youth and maybe many of you in this room have gone through. And so I don't find myself anything unique in that, other than just saying that God did something great and He's doing something great. I enjoy now Jesus. Jesus is one of my favorite things to be with and learn from and engage. But in terms of the tangible things, I love to be with my family. I love kids. I love to fish. I love to crab. And
apparently you are doing all the things I don't like.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. I like kids. Okay.
Sometimes. That's kidding. I also enjoy lifting, exercise, those sorts of things when I get into those proper rhythms. I've been out of rhythm for some time now.
Now, how did you come to know Jesus? Because obviously with your history, this wasn't a part of your growing up years. and it was later in your experience that you encountered Jesus. So how long ago was that?
Yeah, I would never say I encountered Jesus, but Jesus encountered me, right? So Jesus encountered me in 2002. Probably a year or two prior to that, I went to an outside organization called the Fifth Quarter Cafe, where teens would come and huddle during the ball games of Friday Night Lights. And if you know anything about Ohio, it is all about sports. It really becomes sports, then God, then family. Here it's different, right? So I went to this Friday night Fifth Quarter Cafe, started hearing about Jesus. A guy invited me in, said, "Hey, I'll give you some pop and buy you a pop and some pizza." I'm like, "Heck yeah!"
By the way, pop is soda. Just for you that don't know, right? Because they're weird down here. They don't. So.
Okay. And so I went and it was pretty cool. There was probably 100 or so kids there, and I got myself in a little bit of trouble there. I was asked to leave from that ministry for a short period of time until I said sorry for getting into an argument around a pool table. Nevertheless, I started pursuing my girlfriend at that time, being now is my wife, Jody, and her family had gone to a American Baptist church, and Reverend Virgil Reeve was preaching on heaven and hell that day I went there, and I tell people it's humorous now, but he literally scared the hell out of me. And so I began to trust Jesus those moments, May 5th of 2002, in the pursuit of understanding who I am and what God wants me to be.
Which is amazing, because if you think of the people 20 years from now who won't be where they will if we don't do what God's calling us to do. So tell us a little bit about your family.
Some of you may know that I was here many years ago, actually about 6.5 years ago now, and my family was small. We only had 3 children at that time. We now have 8 children, which 5 of them are adopted, 3 are biological, but they're all family, and I love them dearly. And they all have their unique needs. It's just amazing. Hopefully you will get to, as I share with Family Alliance Church, that we will do ministry together. They're not a byproduct of something, but they are a part of a greater family called God's family. And so that's my family, that we take my kids everywhere we go. We don't separate them out in terms of you get here. We just do ministry together wherever we go. So.
And you're going to get a chance to meet them in a little bit, hopefully. See the whole crew. Which is going to be great. Now, for those of you that are familiar with Mike and the family, and he's already alluded to this, he served at Atlanta Road Alliance Church previously, so he was not a stranger to us. But you were here for 3 years and then you left to go back to Ohio, and now you're back here. So just explain that journey a little bit, like why you left, and then kind of why you're coming back this way.
Yeah. So. I left predominantly, as some of you guys were here then, was to go assist my sister. My sister had fallen into great hard times with addiction and lost her children and so on and so forth. And she called me one evening and said, "Hey, I need you." And then it was a God moment, I would always say. It was a God moment. And in the same time, Edgewood Alliance Church, Family Alliance Church was looking for a lead pastor. And it all paralleled up, and God said it's time to go be back with your family to help them through their struggle and in hopes. And that was my always prayer, is that they would be led to Jesus in a deeper sense. And so that was my navigation from here back to Ohio. For the last 6 years, I led the church there, and I seen my sister, my brother-in-law, my mother, and my father, and my sister all come to know Jesus. So.
That's fantastic. Love it. Now, it was very interesting because you went from an associate role here to a lead role, the big dog, right, there, and now you're coming back into an associate role. So when the conversations began to happen about the potential of being here, what kind of drew you back? Obviously the call of God, but flesh that out a little bit for us.
Yeah, a lot of it had to do with 2 things. I always felt like my work was always unfinished in Seaford. When we left, we knew we would eventually, hopefully, make our way back towards the East Coast. But really had to do with just engaging what God is doing. And I love partnering in ministry. I never felt that you or your team was more like I'm the superior, which was a big deal for me. I wanted to be a partner in ministry and emulate that not only for us and show that it can be done and done well, but also for each and every one of us that serves in ministry. So I learned a lot of that in the lead pastor role. Leading, I never, ever, ever, ever felt myself be a leader, and especially leading a church through some difficult times, but in recent years, some very, very exciting moments at Family Alliance.
So here's a question, and this came up when we were talking as leadership, because obviously, you know how it is when someone leaves and they go away, and then they come back 5 years later, you remember them as they left, right? Not as they come back. But obviously, growth continues in the midst of all that. So one of the things that I wanted to spend a little bit of time on is to just talk about, so how has God changed you in the past 5 years? Because obviously through working with your family, leading a church, I mean, there was a lot of experience, a lot of things that happened. How are you different coming back here than you were when you left?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest challenges but blessings that took me away was it is easy to complain about the way the churches should be rather than jumping in and becoming part of the solution rather than becoming a problem. I think it's easy for us to throw stones than it is to pick up stones and begin to work together. And so one of the things in the lead role is you really can't do that. It's easy to
That's right. They say complaints always go up, never down, right?
Yes.
So when you're at the top, they have nowhere to go.
Yeah, that's right. And so I really began to appreciate the body for what they were and who they are and what they will become. I began to appreciate the leadership and their time and energy and resources, whether it's 10 minutes a week they can give me, or not me personally, but to the church and to the Lord, or it was hours on end. And so I think it was easy to look at, man, keep doing more, keep doing more, keep doing more, keep doing more, and find out they're giving everything they can. And so that was one of the greatest blessings I learned. But the other part was the same for the community. I have a greater appreciation and direction now in my call in ministry to our community with working with students and coaches and be able to work with our administration and teachers. Through the last 6 years, I've come to tailor my way into those things and have really, really enjoyed those moments.
Now, you changed. You actually had some more education achievements while you're gone. What were those?
So I just obtained, as of a month and a half ago, a master's in special education. So I work with those who struggle with academics and or learning disabilities, physical or emotional or mental. So.
Yeah, it's awesome. And just so you know, he had been in the job for 2 weeks and had been offered a job in Seaford in the schools, and I made sure he said no. But there's a need there, and the way that God has kind of leaned into that in part of your life has equipped you to be part of that. So actually, I'm not going to leave that question for a second. In terms of what's changed, right? Those are some of the things you've learned to appreciate about people, but what about you personally? Like, how are you different? What has deepened in your faith? What has been challenged, or how do you approach people in ministry different than you used to?
For me, it's the knowing that time is limited. We just sang a bunch of songs, or we got to worship God in those songs, however you portray that. But, there's a time and a day coming near where Jesus is coming back. And my family has suffered a lot in physical death, and knowing that they were here today and was gone tomorrow. And that there's a human being. It's not a plant, it's not an animal, it's a human being that passed away. And they're made in the image of God, and every person has an opportunity and should have the opportunity to hear of the goodness of who God is. And so embrace the process. One of the things I say in here is I learned to embrace the process of growing and not try to fight it off. And so knowing that I don't have all the answers, but collectively the body of Christ can do it. And so those are some of the things for me personally that is just embrace the body, embrace the community for who they are, but understanding that tomorrow could be their last day or in moments. I mean, it was a scary moment this past week, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we were at the police station praying for our friends at the police station, and one of the pastors just dropped. Now, it was an emergency situation, and, instantly my heart was like, oh my goodness, But here it is, a man of God, just, he's fine. Praise the Lord, he worked out, everything worked out fine. But that could have been his last breath right before us. And so that's the urgency.
I was just going to say, it lends an urgency to what we're doing. Yep. This is not a casual thing. And I've said this for the last 2.5 years. Following Jesus is not something you do on the side, right? It's something that's core to who we are. So, as you come back and you and your family engage with us, what are you most passionate about? What motivates you?
Putting a smile on someone's face. I love seeing people smile. I love people enjoying life, even in the midst of the most difficult circumstances. God is so good. You don't realize what you don't have until it's gone, right? You know how that saying goes. Seeing somebody smile and knowing that they're having a bad day is a beautiful thing. Finding ways to love Jesus more, finding ways to be more intimate with him, puts a smile on my face. It ignites me, it invigorates me. Seeing people to surrender their life to Jesus. Yes, those are all pastoral things in terms of a Christian, but those are things that really highlight me and really make me excited. Being with my family and seeing them excel at the things they want to do and pursue puts a smile on my face. Right? You have
this is not just for certain people, right? We've talked about how every one of us is supposed to be engaged in inviting. And it's one of the reasons we're doing those cards that you see, the celebration cards. We're inviting people not only to pray over people and be prayed over, but to invite people into their life and relationships, people who don't know Jesus. We're all doing that, but there are people that God has gifted above and beyond. That's a passion for you, right? A giftedness that God has kind of laid on you in terms of relating to people.
Yeah.
And so you like to do that. And so now, when we get to the specifics, right, because that's a little bit about you, but obviously the reason you're here is to help us as we develop this concept of a missional outpost, a new expression of Atlanta Road Alliance Church in the community around us. And obviously we're early, because you've only been here for 4 weeks, but just give us some of your early thoughts about, how we're going to get there and what it might look like.
Do you want the sarcastic side of me, or do you not?
Absolutely.
I am not doing this. No, I'm just kidding. No, a lot of it, we laugh in the office and around is I have certain rhythms I remember things by, and so I'm going to give you the 4 Ps, right? The practical ways, right? What are some of the thoughts that I think that God is calling the missional outpost is being prayer focused. Being prayer focused. I'm not saying everybody through the outpost is going to be prayer focused, but the team should be prayer focused. ARAC should be prayer focused, and it really meshes up with our motto here, being prayer led and focused that way. But then once we're prayer focused, we become people focused, right? God is going to lead us to the right people in the right needs, and which leads us to the practical needs, right? We can't meet practical needs if we don't know the people. And we're not going to meet the people unless we know the one that can provide. And the last one is program focused. And I keep programs at the bottom because so many times we find organizations driven by the program and they miss the opportunity to be about people, right? And so for me, we need to hear from God. And that's my first and foremost, most intentional time. People want to know what I do every day. I spend a lot of time engaging God in prayer and learning and reading books on how to lead well in terms of new opportunities and organizations.
So there's this whole process of saying we're going to lead with prayer. We've already said prayer is the most important thing that we do. We want to be a church that prays, right? We want to be known as a church that prays. We want to be people that pray. And so this fits right into that. And based on that prayer, God will then connect us with the people that we need to connect to so we can meet the needs that we need to meet. And as a result, then build the things and the structures that we need to make that happen. what in terms of then leadership? Because part of that is, of course, looking for people, whether it's here in this room or people that aren't here yet, who are going to want to be part of what that is.
Yeah, so I now only going from 4 P's, now we're going to go to 3 E's, right? 3 E's. 3 E's are engage potential leaders, equip leaders, and then empower leaders. So we're going to engage, we're going to equip, and we're going to empower.
Now, that's really important because what it means is we didn't hire Mike to do all the work, right? We hired Mike to say he wants to find like-minded people, like-passionate people, and then equip and empower them, correct?
Absolutely. In reality is, I don't know how to do that yet. I don't know how to do that entirely. I've been in ministry for 15 years, and I'm still figuring this all out. But that's where we come, Lord, you are the provider. Lord, you're going to meet the people. Lord, you're going to bring the practical needs. Lord, you're going to bring the programs. Lord, you're going to bring the leaders. You're going to engage them. You're going to equip them. You're going to empower them and to do the work of ministry.
So for those that are curious, then what does a typical week, I know there is no real typical in ministry, but what would a normal week involve or include for you then? At least here at the beginning.
Just hanging out with Will and talking about sports and enjoying his Coors Light that he drinks. No, I'm just kidding.
People aren't going to get that joke.
Okay. So funny story. We were talking about, we were doing ministry at Platform, I believe it was, just how his brain works, how my brain works, and one day he pulls out of his cooler, or his refrigerator. And he pulls out a can of pop, and I look like a can of Coors Light. I'm like, oh, that's what you do. He goes, I only do one a day. Obviously joking around, but it was. This
is what happens when you buy generic Sam's Club cola. It looks like a Coors Light. So
now as
Mike got really excited and then was quickly deflated.
I'm supposed to tell him that part.
But you've begun to make connections already, and that's a big part of what you're supposed to be doing, right? So what does that include? Like, what are some of the things that have happened
So
here?
some of the things that we are doing, we have connected with the city officials. We have connected with some of the hospital officials. Mm-hmm. We have connected with the police officials. I've connected with Young Life already. I've connected with Susan over at the high school already. I've connected with the football coach.
In fact, I think you get to do some part-time work on the side with the team, not only connecting with the coaches, but with the students, which is going to be awesome.
That is correct. I'm going to be sharing devotionals with the students and those sorts of things coming up.
The high school wanted a chaplain for their team, so... And I know you work out at the gym because you make connections there, plus it's something that you like to do, so there's something in that. But as we are kind of coming to the close, because we want to leave some space here for our actual commissioning of you and your family, there's an event that kind of came out of your history in Ohio that you're doing here that we get to engage in, but there's a time crunch on it, and it's called Stuff the Bus. So why don't you explain to people what this is and what they can do?
Yeah. So Stuff the Bus came out of, again, as an educator, we know that many of our educators must pay for their own supplies in their classrooms. So, for example, their pencil sharpeners, their borders, anything that engages their beautifying their room or engaging the students, the teachers must supply their own needs. The administrations cannot afford that, pay for that, whatever reasons they are. But so out of that came the idea that so much attention is focused on our students, which will continue to do so in our community with the backpacks and all those sort of things. So I'm like, well, what a tangible way we can engage our teachers, our administrations, and help facilitate what some of the needs and alleviate some of their needs in the classroom for them. And so the idea came up in Ohio of Stuff the Bus, and then and go basically the teachers get to go shopping for free on a bus. They go walk in one area of the bus and walk out, and then we will pray for the teachers as they exit the bus for the upcoming year.
So we literally are looking to buy as many supplies as we can, and we will stuff them in a bus that they then need to go through and take it. And this isn't just us. So we're doing this within the context of Unified Seaford. There's a couple other churches that are doing this. We're inviting more and more people into this. And so there's two ways people can participate, right? One is go shopping. And there's a time crunch because we need to have all this in by, what is it, August the 17th?
17th.
Because obviously the teachers need their supplies before they go back. And so we need people, and we'll have a place here you can drop them off. We're one of the 2 drop-off spots. And there's flyers with lists of things that you can buy. and you can go do that. We'd encourage you to be generous. Get a whole bunch, make multiple trips, because we want to bless our educators.
Yes.
And then if you want to be part of the day,
Yep.
they can come do that. And that involves just being there to be someone who directs traffic, or if you want to have a chance to actually pray over teachers. We'd love to have you do that.
Yep.
Tell Mike, and he'll help direct you.
Yeah, and what really neat about that is we have Jordy, which is Mandy, thank you. Mandy's daughter. She works for a radio station, TV station.
Mandy being our office professional here.
Yep. And so she contacted him right away, and she's going to put us on Bright News on media to advertise this. We actually have a Zoom meeting tomorrow morning at 8:30.
So you can watch. Mike will be on television
with Mason
promoting
McGill.
This.
I'm trying to deflect everything off this because I hate this stuff. I just want Jesus to be known. That's all I care about. But these are tangible ways. So I get a little squirmish when it comes to public speaking and those sorts of things.
So a lot of what's going on is that's a tangible thing. I think it's going to be great. It's a way for us to connect. It's given Mike a chance to connect into the schools and gives us as Unified Seafers a further leg into getting all of our churches connected with what God is doing in the community. So I think it's an amazing thing. Get on board on that. Take a flyer. You can also just click the QR code, I think, is out there. You can download it. You can see all that stuff. But be a part of that. And then as the months go forward, and what Mike and I are going to do is probably every 8 weeks or so, we're going to try and get up here and give you an update on what the Mission Outpost is looking. Because the next steps are identifying the groups that we're going to focus in on, what are some of the things we think we might do. Because as you know from our original plan, by the end of this year, we want to start looking at physical locations as to where that might be. And so we'll do that. Any last thoughts before we do?
I would just say don't be a solo in it all. Embrace the process. Embrace the mission. Let's do it together. Whether you're a prayer warrior or you like to give with your time, your talents, your treasures, just don't sit idly by and just get an update. Enjoy the journey that God has us on together.